I can see that the word has gone out about how wonderful he is, so yeah, a great crowd. Henry Augustine Tate has been associated with the Museum of Fine Arts in Boston for over 3 decades. He also was on the lecturing staff at Fenway Court, the Isabella Stewart Gardner Museum, and is an avowed Sargentolotrist. At present, he's the senior art historian at the Berklee College of Music. Please welcome Dr. Tate.
And I'd like to thank Joni Goldheimer, who has been a friend of mine for longer than I'd like to admit, I guess, because it was Joni who suggested that I come out to visit you today. And just out of curiosity, I noticed there's a balloon there that says Happy Valentine's Day. Does anyone know the origins of Valentine's Day? There was in ancient Rome a celebration, and it was a women's celebration. It was called Lupercalia, Lupercalia. And the reason why it was called Lupercalia, if you study Latin, you probably know that the word lupus means wolf. And Lupercalia, all of the available young women would weave wreaths of wildflowers. The young gentlemen would strip down to loincloths made of the wolf skin. And the young men would be hiding in the forest. And when a bell rang, the women would go running into the forest looking for a desirable young man. And if she could get her wreath of wildflowers on the head of the young man, he was hers for the season. It's something that I refer to as try it before you buy it. But that's actually the origin of it all, and it was a festival that took place in the middle of the month of fever. Remember Peggy Lee? He gives me fever. Because in Latin, the letters B and V are interchangeable. So the Latin word, if you take a look at some old documents, you'll see the month of what we say February as februarius. So the month of fever, and the festival took place in the month of fever, the middle, 30 days of September. February 14th is the middle. And then, of course, when Christianity developed, the Christian world incorporated the old festivals, but the way that they did it, certainly watered down. Yeah. But it certainly, it was with us till at least the 6th century when one of the popes banished it. So I just thought you'd like to know that when I saw that. But this is, again, it's the month of fever, and the weather is supposed to be very good right now. We're supposed to be getting up to the 50s or so, they tell us, but we live in New England, so who's to know? At any rate, today we're going to be celebrating the great American painter John Singer Sargent. And although we like to boast him as an American painter, he was born in Florence, Italy. His mother's family was from the Philadelphia Main Line. Father's family was from this area, Boston up to Rockport. And he never came to the United States until he was 20 years old. But when he arrived at the age of 20, he had already established a reputation as being one of the finest portrait painters of his time. So, his mother was a watercolorist, and she recognized his talent very early on. And so she saw to it that the family moved from Florence, Italy, to Paris, so that their son could receive the best art education available. His parents, by the way, were what were known as expatriate Americans. I think it may have had something to do with the fact that they realized it was a lot less expensive and probably a lot more glamorous to live in the great hotels of Europe than it would be to maintain a household on the Philadelphia main line. But at any rate, as I mentioned, he didn't come to the United States until he was 20 years old. He was born in 1856. And so the reason why he came, two reasons actually. One was to establish his American citizenship, because if he hadn't done that by the age of 21, he would have to relent. And the other reason was that he wanted to visit his American relatives in Philadelphia. Remember, he was born in 1856. He comes at the age of 20, 1876, to, among other things, visit the Philadelphia Centennial Exhibition. However, he didn't come to Boston until about 5 years later. And when he came to Boston, he made some of the truly great portraits of the 19th century. And we'll be talking about them. But I want you to know, first off, that Sargent hated painting portraits. But that is the way he was keeping his living. His favorite media was working in watercolor. And so he would paint portraits in what he called the off-season. But as soon as the month of fever comes around and about, he began to move away from portrait painting. Something else I'd like to tell you about Sargent that a lot of people are not aware of. John Sargent was a superb musician. And if you wanted your portrait painted by Sargent, he would say, well, where do you want the portrait painted? And if you said, in my library, fine. Is there a piano in the library? No, but we have one in the front parlor. Well, wheel that into the library. If you don't have a piano, he would talk to his friend, Mrs. Gardner, Isabella Stewart Gardner, and he would paint the portrait in Mrs. Gardner's Gothic. And the reason why he would insist on a piano is because he would paint for 2 hours, and then he'd take a break. And during that break, he would smoke cigars and drink brandy and play the piano. And we are told there's a lovely portrait at the MFA, which I'll show you in slide form, Mrs. Charles Inches, or her name is actually Louisa Pomeroy. And when the painting was being made, one of the kitchen staff came in with brandy and cigars for Sargent and with tea and biscuits for Mrs. Inches. And the kitchen maid went back to the kitchen and said to the other maid, "Isn't it lovely that when Mr. Sargent tires of playing the piano, he makes such lovely pictures?" But he had 2 friends that were very important. As Connie was telling you, almost half my life now has been spent at the Museum of Fine Arts. Not a bad place.
No.
At all, just spend half of your life. I didn't realize that until right now. But the Museum of Fine Arts is so enriched by the association with Sargent. Sargent never actually had a home in the United States, but he said that Boston was as close to a hometown as he had, because he would stay either, most of the time, Copley Plaza Hotel. He took rooms at the Copley Plaza. I don't know if you know this, but the Copley Plaza in Boston is the site of the original Museum of Fine Arts. Did you know that? That's the site of the original Museum of Fine Arts. If you're going to the museum, and I hope you will, sometime before May, there's an exhibition that's on view right now of the Copley Square Museum. When the Fenway area was completed, the museum decided to make the move to because there was really space there, which there wasn't to expand. And speaking of expansion, I think many of you have had the pleasure of visiting the new Art in the Americas wing. And the museum has dedicated a gallery and a half just to the work of Sargent. And later on, I don't know if I have enough with me, because I had my Berkeley students at the museum yesterday, and I had some of their study guides left over. And among the things that their study guides, a listing of the works that we studied yesterday is on one side. The other side, there is Sargent's murals. Some people are not aware of this because they don't look like the work of Sargent. But when you go in the Huntington Avenue entrance, all of those murals are the work of Sargent. The reason why they take on a rather classical quality, as you see it here, the Muses, is because it's a neoclassic building. And so Sargent wanted to stay with the theme. But so you could pick up one of these. I also brought along with me, and again, I know I don't have enough for all of you, so for those of you who are here with your Valentine, I suggest you only take one. But one of the loveliest of them all, and forgive my arrogance, I call this number 3 at the Tate Gallery in London. Carnation, Lily, Lily, Rose. You'll see this later, but on the other side, I have printed up a photograph of Sargent actually painting that work. So they will be yours if you get here soon enough. But it's just a very special area just for the work of John Sargent. Now, and by the way, as we're going along, if you have any questions, please let me know. Because he's actually one of my favorites to talk about. I was thinking of something else. I know Joni knows about this because of our art history background. Some of you may know the great portrait by John Singer Sargent. Forgive me, by Domenico's Tate, more popularly known as El Greco. If you know the museum's collection, there's a wonderful portrait of Fray Felix.
We can't hear you. We can't hear you.
I'm sorry. Yeah, I moved away. How are we doing?
Better.
Thank you for letting me know.
Please, thank you.
I have a tendency to talk into my beard. Can you hear me now?
Oh, much better. Thank you.
Good.
Thank
Thank you,
you.
Connie. And thank you for letting me know. I was mentioning a portrait by El Greco of Fray Felix. Does that come to anyone's mind? If you know that painting, I want you to know that it was John Sargent who made the purchase of that painting for the museum. And the reason why I'm telling you that is that later on in our presentation, we're going to be talking about a portrait by John Sargent. And the image reminds me so much of the image by El Greco. But we'll talk about that later. So I gave you a bit of a biography of Sargent. And some of you may remember that about a decade ago, I'm at a point in life where I say less than 15, but more than 10 years ago, the museum co-sponsored an exhibition just of the work of John Sargent with the Tate Gallery in London. And this is actually the banner that you see is an image of Dr. Palsy. And this is the one that I feel Sargent may have used, the portrait by El Greco, to get it. I think I can actually give you a better focus on this work. That's better? Now, for those of you who are not familiar with this painting, the first thing I want you to know is that it's its size. It's 8 feet by 8 feet. And I was talking about this painting once before. Well, back to the mic. I was talking about it once before, and someone in the group was under the impression that this was a photograph that I made of a mantelpiece, and that these were just small little Ming Dynasty vases there. Not that at all, but the painting, the figures are life-size. And I personally think of this as Sargent's second greatest work. To me, number 3 is Carnation Lily Lily Rose, but number 1 has to be El Jaleo at the Garden Museum, the Spanish dancers. But I want you to get a better idea of how this painting works, because at one point in my life, I thought that I was going to be a painter. And so I had some good training as a painter. But then when one marries and one begins to have children, you realize that the funds are not always quite so available. So I ended up working in art museums, but talking about works of art in terms of what I thought the painter had in mind. Now, you all know that the primary colors are red, yellow, and blue. Red is the color with the most intense wavelength. I believe, well, there's the exit sign in red. My eye seems to be moving in that direction right now, on account of the 2 of you who are wearing red sweaters, red blouses. But red's the color with the most intense wavelength. I think that might be why a fire engine is red. I think that might be why a traffic light is red. And I don't know. So when I don't know, I say, I offer to you for your consideration. That way I'm backing up my own fallacies. But think about a traffic light. It's red, yellow, green. Green is a secondary color. Green is a combination of 2 primaries, yellow and blue. And what you might have noticed in our bad weather that we've had this winter, sometimes you get to a traffic intersection and the red light will be flashing. You see, and I think that might also be why school buses are yellow. Yeah, so all of these, it's very scientific in a way. Now, I want you to look at this painting and try to envision, and you can probably do it if you close one eye from where you're seated and block out that red screen. Try that. So close one eye and block out the red screen. Do you see what happens? The painting is thrown on a diagonal. You see, your eye moves there. And the reason is because the 8-year-old sister is wearing a red dress, white pinafore over the red dress. But the red, you have to be really careful. Many of you know this if you're painters yourself. But it's that red screen that you see here. And by the way, you would see it much better when you visit the museum. But that red screen just becomes, it has no real volume to it. It's just a thrust, it's a dagger that throws your eye to the floor. But there are 2 strokes here of yellow, and there's the main vase, the blue and white. So there's accounts for the red, yellow, and blue. And so that draws your eye to the floor where you meet the 4-year-old. There are 4 sisters, 4, 8, 14, and 12. All right? Now, what a sweetheart. And you see she has a doll that is pink with red highlights. Well, that's important because that doll becomes an anchor. And the 4-year-old girl is a sweetheart. I mean, she just sits there, oh, she's so delighted. You've just walked into the room. And so she's inviting you to come and to see her new doll. So the doll with the doll. But you'll note that the doll is painted in a very impressionistic manner. It's very sporadic in its presence. And because otherwise the painting would be called The Daughters of Edward Darley Boyd and the Doll. So he just works this out to allow your eye to be anchored. But you might note as well that she sits on a Chinese rug. the patterned Chinese rug has a rectangular border, and the rectangular border in turn brings the viewer's eye to her 8-year-old sister. Now, her 8-year-old sister, I think of her as being displaced. You know, she was the baby, but now someone else is coming and taking over that special place. Now, when you see the 8-year-old sister, there's something very tenuous about her. Her hands are behind her back. She's probably shifting around a little bit. And when you're studying the work of Sargent, and you can do this, you can't do it here because we're just looking at slides, but when you're at the museum, notice the way the artist uses whites. It's just astonishing. Some years ago when we were having the Sargent exhibition, I went to the local True Value hardware store and I picked up all of these variant paint chips. And I had 40 paint chips, all different types of white. And I was studying this little girl's pinafore, and there were 4 of the whites that hadn't been included in the book that I brought. Watch what he does with it, because it's just, to me, no one can quite do it. Let me take this one up as well. You can see this a little bit here. Now, there's a technique that Sargent uses. Do you see that stroke right here? The term is scumbling. S-C-U-M-B-L-I-N-G. Scumbling is mixing wet paint into wet paint. You follow what I mean? So do you see how that brush stroke has been thrust down, and it's thrust down, it picks up some of the reds there. But Sargent, in his writing, says when it comes to portraits, the only thing that is essential is the face. And so you'll notice when you're looking at Sargent's portraits that the face has a genuine, a realistic quality to it. But the rest of the stuff, the clothing and the doll and the rest take on a rather abstract quality, or impressionist quality. And I started to mention something to you earlier about Sargent as a musician. Sargent's best musician friend when he was living in Paris is Gabriel Fauré. A lot of great piano music coming from Fauré. Something that just always disturbs me every time I hear it. Fauré's Requiem, and especially the Pie Jesu. And Fauré sends notes. He says that he would like the Pie Jesu sung singly by a boy soprano between the ages of 11 and 13. And that's all he says, but I think the reason why you're saying that is because the boy soprano's voice would be changing. And so it had this quivering quality. And Sargent concertized with Gabriel Fauré. His best painter friend, you may have heard of, because my friend Denis has spoken to you of Impressionism. His best painter friend is Claude Monet. And of course, when the painters we call the Impressionists first started to work, their paintings were denigrated. And the reason why they were denigrated, no question about it to me, is that the Beaux-Arts Academy, which was a state-sponsored organization, was pushing the academic style. And I'm sure that there was a fear that if this newfangled style called Impressionism ever came to the forefront, that the academic style would fall out of fashion. And so Sargent is with his good friends to Claude Monet, and what happened when relatives or friends would come from Boston or Philadelphia, Sargent would say, well, you've got this new museum in Boston, you have American paintings, but no European, so why don't you take what's available? And of course, what was available was the work of Monet. And as a result,
the Museum of Fine Arts has the largest collection of Monet's work in the world. There is no museum. The Monet Museum in Giverny, take a look sometime and you will see on the label it will say courtesy Museum of Fine Arts, Boston. Because we have so many. You might remember the Monet show that we had, Monet in the 90s, where the whole second floor had to be emptied. So it's a great tribute. Again, thanks to Sargent that we have that collection. So here's the 8-year-old sister, and as I was saying, she has a rather tenuous quality to her. There's the full painting. But you might note at this point, there is, take a look at the 8-year-old's head. You see, part of this is in light and the other shadow. That's a term, the term is chiaroscuro. I'm sure it's a term that many of you have heard. Chiaroscuro, from the Italian chiara oscuro. Chiara means light, oscuro means shadow. And it's a way that the artist has of modeling through the use of light and shadow. But you might note she is standing, and as the light comes into the room, it's really an arc light. Now the arc light in turn should bring the viewer's eye to the vase, the Ming vase, the blue and white vase. Now, if you look at that carefully, look what he's done. You see the stroke? And then with the single loading of the brush, we have this, and that just drags down. Scumbling again, working into wet paint. Oh, very important, and I know I haven't mentioned this. The painters we call the Impressionists were the first to use paint packaged in tubes. I thought paint was always packaged in tubes. No way, Jose. No, this was something new. 1868, paint was packaged in tubes. And so this is a synthetic paint, and the artist is able to build up the surface of the canvas with this pigment. And of course, from the time of Leonardo da Vinci, Raffaello, artists were seeking what they called the invisible brushstroke. A painting was supposed to be a window to the world. And people caroled around with their lorgnettes, oh, there's a brushstroke. If they could find a brushstroke, that meant the painter wasn't capable of camouflaging it. And so this is probably another reason why the academic painters were a little bit concerned about this new style. But at any rate, here is the 14 and the 12-year-old sister. And did you notice that as the girls get older, they seem to retreat further and further into the darkness? I don't know, it's just I've made such intense study of Sargent that I think of this as a psychological painting. You know, there's the 4-year-old, so happy and glad to see you. 8-year-old sister, a little tenuous. 14-year-old sister. I call this the Greta Garbo phase. I want to be left alone. She's 14. And I remember many years back when my daughter turned 16. We were asking, what would you like to have? And what she wanted was for me to take a group of her friends to the art museum and give them a walk through. Yeah, sure. There were so many other things that she could have fetched. And so I was, because I thought this would be a great painting for a group of girls. And I was talking about, again, what I've always called the Greta Garbo phase. And one of the guests at the party turned to me and said, Mr. Tate, she has cramps. And from that point on, of course, I reread it, but this, of course, would be coming from the mouth of a 16-year-old girl. And again, I want to ask if somebody would turn off those lights in the back, because we're just getting so much, if that's possible. just too much, is that slightly better?
Yes.
Slightly better. All right, but now we've got, so you see how the 14-year-old glowers? I think that's the word. And then we have her 12-year-old sister. Oh, the poor girl, she's 12. You know, what a terrible time. You know, my arms are too long and my legs are too short and my face is breaking out and nobody's going to ask me to dance. And when I'm going to get rid of these damn braces. But it's all, do you see how awkward she appears? And you'll note that the girls all wear their hair over their shoulders, with the exception of the 12-year-old girl. And I think the reason, again, offering to you for your consideration, I think the reason why Sargent did that is because if her hair were down both sides, your eye would come to a halt. But by creating this triangular directional, your eye continues, and as it continues, it moves into the middle room, where you find a mantelpiece with two smaller versions of the main vases, and a mirror. The mirror is on the very same line as the red screen. It's musical. It's absolute music. And it is only, I think, a musician who would be able to create something of the sort. And as I said, to me, this is Sargent's second most important work. Now, also, we'll keep that in mind. I should mention that you saw earlier, and go back, these two vases. As I said, they are now positioned next to the painting. Sorry, next to the painting. The youngest girl, Julia is her name. She passed in about 10 years, 97 now. Time passes when you're having a good time. 1997 she passed at the age of 104. And in her will, because the girls gave the painting to the museum in 1919, which was the year that their father passed. But the vases remained in the family until Julia passed in 1997, at which point they were brought to the Museum of Fine Arts. And just some, well, my mom used to call that backstairs gossip, but I thought you might enjoy hearing it. So there. Now, this is a photograph, and again, I have copies of that for some of you. Sargent painting outside. Now, I also want you to keep in mind when you're looking at some of these works, that painters at the time, if they were working on a landscape, they would take their sketchbook and crayons or pastel chalks out, and they would try to sketch what it was that they were looking at. And then they would go back into their studio, and over the next 2 or 3 weeks, and sometimes, they would try to recreate in the studio what they had seen outside. Now, painters no longer have that problem. In this photograph, you see that Sargent has a picnic basket, and that picnic basket contains his brushes, his tools, his paints, probably some cigars and brandy as well. But so it just frees the artist up, and the artists are working directly from nature. And this is the painting that was being made. Carnation, Lily, Lily, Rose, which is the name of a music hall song, very popular at the time. These are the two children, the Ormonds, who are friends to Sargent. Broadway, he was living in London at the time. And the image that you're looking at, the painting is of this girl, Polly. There is a sketch of that work at in the museum's collection right now. It's from a private collection, but we have had the good fortune of allowing us to have that for the show. And this is a better view of the finished painting. So the girls are in their garden, and they're lighting Chinese lanterns for an evening party. Note, as you will, and you'll see it better, I think, than you're seeing it right now. But there's actually, as the girls are dipping the taper into the bowl of the lantern, you can see that there's a reflection of the light, the burning light of the lantern, the flame on her fingers and on her face. That is quite the beauty. And it's again one of, well, those of us who enjoy the work of Sargent, we're sometimes referred to as Sargentologists, which is a fusion of the name Sargent and idolatry. So we Sargentologists find this to be one of the great best. And then we were talking about Mrs. Gardner. Well, Mrs. Gardner and John Sargent were very good friends. And Sargent stayed with the Gardners when they lived on Beacon Street, 152 Beacon Street. And then after John's passing in 1896, Mrs. Gardner decided that she was going to build the museum that they had always intended. And property was available on the Fens. The Fens had just been completed. And so Mrs. Gardner moved to what was called the Wilds of Boston. And she was the first person to actually purchase and maintain property on the Fenway. And she, as you know, because I'm sure that most of you have been to the Gardner Museum, which is called Fenway Court, but more popularly known as Isabella Stewart Gardner Museum. When the building opened in 1904, it was supposed to be one of the coldest nights that Boston had ever suffered. It was New Year's Eve of 0304. And Mrs. Gardner wanted people to get the sense that they were going back in time and walking into a Venetian palazzo that had been occupied by the same family for generation after generation after generation. And when she and her husband were visiting Venice, they learned that some of the buildings in Venice had to be torn down because the pilings were rotting. And so the buildings were considered no longer habitable. And so Mrs. Gardner and her husband bought the remains of buildings that were going to be torn down, had them shipped to Boston, and eventually that became the nucleus for the structure. Now, the photograph that you're seeing here is the Gothic room in Fenway Court. This is Sargent's portrait of Mrs. Gardner, and I wanted you to notice this area right here. Now, there's Sargent's portrait, which caused quite the scandal when it was first exhibited. Mrs. Gardner was 40 years old at the time, and that House of Work Paris gown was considered to be somewhat risque. There's this plunging neckline and the rest. But Mrs. Gardner was a New Yorker, and she wasn't very well received in Boston by Bostonians because, among other things, she married Boston's most eligible bachelor. That was one thing. And I was told by a great historian, some of you may remember Walter Muir Whitehill, but he said to me, "Henry, you've got to realize that in Boston, a mixed marriage was marrying someone from Philadelphia or Baltimore." New Yorkers, because you see, Bostonians lost out because Boston was not only the intellectual and aesthetic and cultural center of the U.S., but it was also the financial center. And when the Wall Street brokerages opened in New York, many of the Bostonian financiers made the move as well. And so when John Lowell Gardner married Isabella Stewart of New York, she was not too well received. But this is Sargent's great portrait. And as I said, this is in the Gothic room. Let's see if I can focus that from here. But I wanted you to note this area right here. All right, there's a Della Robbia, Madonna and Child. See that chair? you know, see more about photos. I want you to notice this chair, this angel candlestick, the Della Robbia, mother and child. Mrs. Fisk Warren and her daughter Rachel. Notice the chair. Notice the angel candlesticks and the Della Robbia, mother and child. They're being detailed. And there's a photograph I made about, I think it was last year or the year before. And so that's the way Sergeant was able to pull it together. I was talking to you earlier too about the Sergeant's use of white. Try this, I don't know if it'll work out or not. Do you see that white light that falls on the arm of the chair? Try to block that out, maybe raise index fingers or something. The whole sense of perspective is created with that wash of white. Do you understand what I mean? Because the painting becomes flat otherwise. And look at the difference in the face, you see. All of this, her lacy, fluffy gown is very abstractly painted. But the face of Mrs. Warren, Gretchen Osgood is her name, and daughter Rachel. Rachel has her head cradled in her mother's neck in the same way that the Christ child has it in Mary's. A lovely, lovely piece. And I'll show you something I can tell you too. That's a photograph of Sergeant painting the portrait in the garden. Mrs. Gardner, I am told, is just slipping into the Gothic room with her camera, and she is saying, you see the girl, you see the mother and child? Gotcha! And you see that the Rachel and Mom are enjoying what's just taking place. But there's the work, and it's also one of the featured pieces in our Sergeant Gallery right now. But there's the room itself, but this is it. This is certainly it. The ground floor, as you come into the Gardner Museum, this is what you encounter. And the work is called El Jaleo. Got it? I had a sabbatical last semester, and I spent 4 weeks in Portugal and 6 weeks in Spain. Barcelona. But you see, Tate, El Jaleo, that's what we're dealing with here. And when Mrs. Gardner acquired this painting, originally Fenway Court had a 2-story high music room. But when she acquired this work, she was so taken with it that she had the 2-story high music room cut in half. And so the upper floor is now the music room, but the lower floor was recreated just to house this painting. And so, as you see here, she brought in Moorish columns. In order to get the right effect, Mrs. Gardner had a bank of gas lines behind the spathiphyllum. And of course, the flickering quality of the gas lines gave the impression of gypsies dancing in front of a campfire, which must have been very effective. However, the heat of the gas lamp was baking the varnish on the painting. I'll show you what I mean. That's the way that you will see it today. I will take a look at this a second time. But that's the way that it looked when I came to Boston. The painting was sent to the Museum of Fine Arts Conservation Lab. And here's a photo that I made after the painting, and this is before the painting. And the jump was not so much
Because in this case, it was just a matter of getting the old varnish off. And so now a palladium varnish has been applied, and so we don't have the problems that took place before. I want you to look at that, and would you be kind enough to hold that for me? You got it? It just has, only a musician again would know how to do this. We have the woman, now she's got the castanets in her hand. She is throwing back her skirts. Look at the man next to her. He's enjoying what she's doing, he's clapping along with it. We have this man who is just in this flamenco ecstasy. Now, the two men that you see here are, and this, thank you. I needed that. No, it's just such a great painting. I cannot not get excited when I see something like that. And we're going, see if I can focus that a little bit better for you. You see the two men playing the guitar? There is a flamenco movement that some of you may be familiar with. It's called Gros Diablo. Gros Diablo is the feathery brushing of the strings of the guitar. And look at the two men. One man is still in the process of making that move, and the guy next to him. So one is tight, and the other's relaxed in the presentation. The other man, the next man, he has his castanets seated on the chair. And then the other two, well, a man and 3/4 of a man next to him, as you see them. They're just enjoying everything that's going on as well. Brilliant piece. And as I was saying, I personally think it's his best work. Lest I forget, as you know, the Museum of Fine Arts used to be open. The extended hours were on Wednesday, when the museum was open from 10 until 10. Now, the Museum of Fine Arts, the entire museum is open Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday, 10 to 10, which makes it convenient for so many more of us. What does that take us? Look at that. This is from the Iberian, or the Spanish Historical Society in New York. But if you know the flamenco, I think only Sergeant would be able to capture that. Or this one too, also on view right now. There was the rehearsal of the Winter Circus. My students really enjoyed that one. We were trying to decide if it was Mahler's Ninth Symphony, or if it was Alban Berg. And I love it when the kids begin to have these inner discussions. But there's a sketch for the finished product. This is Mrs. Inches. It was, I mentioned earlier that Mrs. Inch's portrait was being painted when the kitchen maids came through. And isn't it lovely that when Mr. Sargent tires of playing the piano, he makes such lovely pictures. But his portraits, as I said, Major Henry Lee Higginson, founder of the Boston Symphony Orchestra and great benefactor of the Museum of Fine Arts. One of our most important treasures, and actually one of the great treasures of Flemish art in the United States, is this work by Roger van der Weyden, which was presented to the museum by Major Henry Lee Higginson and his wife. Also important to us is Frederick Law Olmsted, the great landscape architect who designed, among other things, the Emerald Necklace, Jamaica Plain to Boston, and Central Park in New York. So these were a great notary of the day. Lady Agnew, isn't she a beauty? And the way that Sargent has her position in this oversized chair, I think, adds to the elegance of the entire composition. But the painting, the portrait that probably costs the most of Sargent's reputation is the portrait of his it's not called Madame X, but it was Madame Pierre Gautreau. For those of you who do not know about this, Virginia Benio, Louisiana-born woman of French heritage, her father lost his great fortune along with the Emancipation Proclamation, because he had charge of many of them old cotton fields back home. And after the Emancipation Proclamation, there were no funds around. And after his passing, his wife decided to take their very beautiful daughter to Paris, to marry her off to a wealthy Parisian. And Virginia Venio was married to a much older man. She was, I think she was about 18, and he was about 48. A banker who had never been married. And it turned out that there was a bit of a scandal because in Paris to begin with, because, well, I think many of you know the term gold digger, and that's, what can I say? And so she was, because of it, she was a professional beauty. And there were such things in those days, don't hate me because I'm beautiful. But that was the trophy wife in our day. So here you see this portrait that Sargent made of her, which caused quite the scandal. Originally, Sargent had one of these diamond straps dangling down over her arm. And Henry James referred to the portrait as a sword about to be removed from its sheath. And the portrait, as you can see, is one that Sargent had a very difficult time with this. But this was eventually successful. You might note she has a diamond clip in her hair in the form of a crescent moon. The crescent moon is a symbol of Diana, the goddess of the hunt. So here she is as a goddess of the hunt, and she is positioned at a table. The capitals on the table legs are the sirens. The sirens who sent Ulysses and his ships off track. And now she is in profile. And as she is in profile, you see that she is, shall we say, studying a portrait of a man whose name is Dr. Armando Pazzi. Dr. Armando Pazzi was the most popular, notice popular, not necessarily the best, but the most popular gynecologist in Paris. And he was known for his, I think the term is bedside manner, his fine bedside manner. And of course the women in Paris, they were all, they wanted to get their appointment with Dr. Pazzi. However, they were finding it even more difficult these days because Dr. Pazzi seemed to be having more and more appointments with Madame Pierre Gautreau. Now, Sargent painted the portrait of Dr. Pazzi, and he exhibited the portraits as you see them. And for the first time ever, since Sargent did it, when we had the Sargent show, that's what we did. And the image, look at Dr. Pazzi, he's wearing this red gown. The guy's gorgeous. Yeah. He's absolutely gorgeous. Diabolically so, I would say. And the way that the image turned out, with the two of them next to each other, she is saying, hey. And he's saying, go ahead, please, people are listening. And it caused such a scandal that Madame Gautreau, Virginia Venio's mother, came to Sargent, and she was going to sue him for libel. She said, you have all of Paris talking about my daughter. And Sargent's retort was, Alderman Paris has always been talking about your daughter. And so Sargent left Paris and he spent the rest of his life in London. And in 1916, he sold the painting to the Metropolitan Museum in New York. Here's a photograph of Sargent in his studio with the portrait of Madame Gautreau, which he then renamed Madame X. And that was the way he got out of the libel suit. The names are changed to protect the innocent. And so here's the installation at the Metropolitan Museum of New York. And the painting has undergone so many transmogrifications, I must tell you. I remember seeing something in a magazine probably 2 or 3 years ago. I'm sorry, I'm ahead of myself. This is Sargent's Madame X. At the museum right now, you'll see a work by Marsden Hartley, which is called The Black Duck. Now, I'm merely offering this to you in consideration, because I can't say. And I looked for, I was going through all kinds of monographs of Marsden Hartley, but there was no mention of this. But to me, I think there was such a connection between the black duck, even the profile, the use of the color. What I was mentioning a moment ago was, there we are, dressed for Bacardi. So this was an ad that was in some magazine, I forgot what it is. But one of my favorites of all, which is called The School Marm. But that just gives you Sargent's watercolors. You'll have time to see them as well in the gallery, as I mentioned to you. But I personally feel that watercolor is the most difficult medium with which to work, because it has to be done very quickly, very deftly. One mistake, forget about it. But this is what Sargent loved doing, and he did it so beautifully well. And so you'll have a chance to see these. Count the whites. Try that sometime. And I wanted to close up with this one image that is called Claude Monet painting in the corner of the woods, accompanied by his wife. If you look at the painting, if you had the chance to see the painting, the actual painting, or if you know the work of Claude Monet, you would say, oh, that's a Monet. But it's not. It's a Sargent painting in the style of Claude Monet. So that's it. So there's a lot to see. If you can afford the time, my suggestion is that there are 4 floors to this new wing. Colonial art and ship models on the ground floor. Second floor, mostly Copley and Gilbert Stuart from that time period. Third floor would be Sargent and Mary Cassatt and Winslow Homer. And then the top floor, the 4th floor, is work of the 20th century American painters. And by the way, it is called Art of the Americas. So I want you to keep in mind that it is not just art from the United States. It's North, Central, and South America. So there's a lot to see, and I hope you will enjoy it. And I enjoyed my time with you. Well, I'll tell you, that calendar that you have, you might know it would just say February. It doesn't say February 2011.
But you see, we keep recycling that. And it's a good idea, because those plates are very expensive to make. And they were chosen by Trevor Fairbrother, who was past curator of American painting. And he was, he left Boston because he became the director of the Seattle Art Museum, but it was his choice. And if you remember the name Trevor Fairbrother, many of the great monographs on Sargent were written by Trevor. Yeah, but it was his selection. Oh, thank you.
December, I think, two children, did about their wedding.
Oh, yes.
I love that.
Yeah.
No, the Sargent did some amazing things. There's Erica Hirschler, who is our current curator of American art. She has written a book which is published, right now you can buy it at the museum, which is called Sargent's Daughters. And it's a biography of those girls. And it too is very popular. It had last May, at Berkeley's commencement, I was asked to give, well, I was the grand marshal. And I addressed not so much the graduates, but their parents and their grandparents, because enough said. And there was someone in the audience that wanted to meet me after my talk. And I was told that this person wanted especially to see the portrait by Sargent of the daughters of Edward Darby Boyd. And of course, anybody wanting to see Sargent, any friend of Sargent's is a friend of mine. And so, because this woman had 2 full-length portraits by Sargent in her own collection. And so I was escorted back to the green room and was introduced to Barbara Streisand.